So tonight I was asked to come and speak about three propositions, 34, 35, and 36. And it seems like every year there's a number of either propositions or Senate bills, Assembly bills, and so tracking all of them is difficult. As an example, I brought you a little stack of Senate bills and Assembly bills that are in various stages, either through the floor or in most cases now sitting on the governor's desk. So obviously we have a significant amount of issues that we're always dealing with. Prop 34 and 35 and 36 are pretty straightforward to me, so what I'm going to do is just kind of mention them, mention where I stand on them, kind of where my counterparts stand on them, and then when I get through the three, if you have questions, I'll certainly be available to answer those questions. The truth of it is if you get too deep into the weeds on some of these, I might not have the answer. If you really desire an answer from me, I'll certainly find it out if you want to give me your name before I leave, and I'll certainly be willing to get back to you on it. So I'll go ahead and start with Prop 34, the death penalty. I am for the death penalty. The California State Sheriff's Association, which is representing 58 sheriffs, statewide organization, is also for the death penalty against Prop 34. We have sent the governor a letter and also contacted him on numerous occasions. We've made it public that we're for the death penalty. The truth is there's a lot of issues centered around the death penalty, and many of you know what most of those issues are, but there's a couple things that I think really stand out with this, and that is first that I fundamentally believe that we shouldn't be paying for people to remain in custody for the rest of their life who have victimized families. And I have a tendency to look at these things myself as an individual first. How would I feel about this? And second of all, I look at it from a perspective in law enforcement in dealing with the victim and the victim's family. A couple of local cases I figured I'd just kind of mention to you to refresh your memory. We really have very few death penalty cases. It's kind of made out to be that we have a tremendous amount. It doesn't mean we don't have a lot of people on death row. It means that locally, the three cases that kind of stand out to me are the Benson case, which happened in the 80s. The gentleman that murdered the children and the mother and burnt the house. One that kind of that many of you know here in Atascadero is the Webb case, also known as the Rainwater case. And then third is the Rex Krebs case. I was in law enforcement in this county when all three of those crimes occurred, and so I'm aware of all three. But probably the one that I'm most aware of is the Krebs case, and the Krebs case is the case out of San Luis Obispo City, the two college girls that were kidnapped and raped and murdered. And I was familiar with the case. I was familiar with the families. As a matter of fact, one of the disappearances, I was actually working that evening, and I used to think about the case fairly regularly about what could I have done driving around in a car to have prevented this. I think personally I'm in favor of it primarily because of the previous reason I stated, and really the impacts on the families. Probably the biggest argument that I've heard against the death penalty, other than personal feelings against taking a life for a life, has really been the cost. I have to admit that we do have some issues in California. We do pay a tremendous amount for the costs of somebody on death row. As a matter of fact, the majority of people die on death row before they're actually put to death. So we have some problems with it, and I think we need to really get to the root of the problem, and that is how much we're spending. The truth is law enforcement is not a money-making business. It's not meant for that purpose. purpose. We cost money to protect people, and unfortunately this is one of the prices of doing business. But I do think that we do need to take a look at a couple of the other states out there that are doing it much more effectively, efficiently, yet also keeping in rights, or keeping in mind that we might have people on death row that did not commit the crimes. And I think we've, in California especially, have gotten so overboard on the protection of rights, we forgot a fundamental person in the whole mix, and that is the victim and the victim's family and what it does to those families. And so I would absolutely entertain the thought of looking at our process and seeing whether or not we could change it to make it more efficient and cost effective for us, but not at the price of giving it up. The second issue is Prop 35, human trafficking and sexual exploitation. And really there's a federal law, but it applies federally, not locally, to this. And what it boils down to, what the proposal is purported to do, is increase prison terms, increase fines in human trafficking, remove the need to prove force to prosecute sex trafficking, mandate human trafficking training for law enforcement, make sex traffickers register as sex offenders, and require all sex offenders to disclose their internet accounts. And I'm going to stop on that one for a minute, because I honestly think that is the most important component of this law, and that is the internet. In the last 10 years, and probably really 5 years, it's changed dramatically. The internet has changed all of our lives. And it's changed, unfortunately, the lives of our victims and our suspects. Many, many cases are of sex trafficking and related crimes are connected to the internet directly. And that is they're out hunting for our children on the internet, and they are enticing them into a life that obviously is devastating in a number of fronts. I don't know if you all saw it, but I brought a copy of it here somewhere. So I wanted to just at least show it to you. And that was a recent article that ran in the Tribune on, of course, you never can find it when you want to find it. Of course.
Just make it up, the Tribune does.
No, it might be in there. Can you look in the back of that very last one? Anyways, I'm going to leave it here. But the interesting thing about it is it's a local woman now from Shell Beach that was caught up in this in the Fresno area, I believe, the Central Valley. Made some changes in her life, fortunately, and got out of it. But now she wrote a book on it and is speaking on the subject. It takes a tremendous amount of courage, obviously, to come forward after having a life like that. And so I think it's important, at least for me, from law enforcement, that we have some protections, again, going back to the victim and the victim rights, and actually putting in place some tools that we can actually hold people accountable when it comes to these types of crimes, because it's not only becoming more prominent now, but I think it's just going to get worse, because we've opened up the internet to all ages at all times, and I think it's that is going to be the venue for these people making their stand. Oh, and her name is Crisa Phelps, if you're interested in looking it up on the website that makes things up. And the last one is Prop 36, the 3 strikes. It's interesting looking at 3 strikes. When 3 strikes first came out, it was initiated or started in 1994. And I was in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement in this county since 1984. And I remember when they proposed 3 strikes, and the concern is that we're going to have a tremendous amount of problems with 3 strikes, because we were going to have people, suspects that had 2 strikes, knew they were going to have a 3rd, and they had nothing to lose at that point, and they were going to commit all kinds of additional crime as a result of that. Well, those were the stories, and that's what a lot of people believed or feared. And in some cases, I completely understood why they might fear that way. But the truth is that that's not what's happened. And the numbers that I see and read, to me, are bona fide numbers. They're from the State Department of Justice, which we are required to submit our crime statistics and information. And those stats actually show that violent crime has declined 17.6% since '94, and homicides by 30.9% since 3 strikes. Property crimes as well, 22%. The prison population of 3 strikes is 6.6 of the population, so it's not a tremendously large portion of the population that's happening. And 83% in, that's for me, gotta go.
Is a chair here?
83% were actually sentenced last decade. Over the last 3 years, less than 8 per year have been sentenced on the 3 strikes, according to the research. So my issue with that is really pretty simple. If we can find a way to discourage, punish, and prevent crime, then why would we change it? Why is there a better way of doing it? We are facing tremendous amount of challenges right now. The economy has had a significant effect on all of us in a variety of ways. It's had a significant effect on law enforcement. We have had to reduce our staffing levels. We have had more laws, many which are next to impossible for us to be able to enforce. And we seem to feel that every time we have a problem with something, we need to create a law on it. And the problem is we have no people to enforce the law. I'm going to make a kind of a really simple example. Prior to being elected, I was with the City of San Luis Obispo Police Department for about 23 years. And in my final, I think it was the last couple, 2-3 years, I was at a council meeting, and when they passed the no smoking in downtown and no feeding the ducks law, I lived in the lake. And my first thought on that was, one, why? I mean, I honestly, I'm a non-smoker, but I really felt like, you know, why are we going to that extreme? But more importantly, from a law enforcement perspective, I said, how? Exactly. How in the world are we going to enforce that? And that was my question. How are we going to enforce such a law on the books as feeding the ducks Wonder Bread? So are we going to tackle, you know, 9-year-olds for this offense? Are we going to chase a smoker down the street hoping we catch them before the cigarette is extinguished or finished? And it's not to minimize the damages of smoking or to minimize the damages to the ducks. That's not my point for bringing it up. It boils down to, if we restrict our law enforcement to doing those types of tasks, aren't we just taking them away from the job that they're really there for? Yes. And the current council, the current state of the city, or the current population of the city might today say, yeah, but we really don't want you to have to go and enforce that. We just want to put it on the books to discourage people. That's great. But that first phone call that happens the very next day, their expectation is that we're coming, and we're coming fast to catch that kid with the Wonder Bread. That's not what we get paid to do. One of the most appealing things to me when I decided to run for sheriff, and it had absolutely, I had no desire to run for public office. Sorry, I'm really, that was really not my goal in life, to put myself and my family through a 2-year election process. Not a very fun one. My goal was to have an ability to affect change, have an ability to actually say what is priority and what's not priority. Because when a law like that comes up, I can make the decision that we're not going to enforce it. That is not our priority. Our priority is providing safety to the citizens of the county. And if the citizens of the county decided that my priority should have been chasing the cigarette, then they will elect me out, and I won't be back for a second, third, according to my wife, fifth, sixth term. We would be able to, I would be able to say, hey, this is not a priority for us. This is not a priority for law enforcement in this county. So I kind of strayed a bit, but I think the truth of it is we keep trying to fix things, we keep trying to add things, and when you look at the last one, Prop 36, 3 strikes, if all of our data, everything we see is indicating that it's successful, then why change it? I think one of the reasons we look at these things, and I think the reason they come up is timing. And as many of you know, with prison realignment, it really changed how we do business. And so what we were faced with is a panel of judges telling California court or California prison system that we had too many people and you have to do something about it and release them. That's not really an acceptable answer. If you're the victim, is that an acceptable answer? But the truth is we really have to take another look on the way that we're doing things. We have to look at ways of preventing some of the crime. We have to do a better job of trying to at least put the effort into preventing some of these people from recommitting these crimes. I think realignment was that answer. The unfortunate end of realignment is really took a population that had been, would have been in prison and sent them to the local level. The benefit, though, of realignment is as of this point, we have funding, our money, that we sent to Sacramento, and they're just sending it back to us to handle the housing. But we have the ability to try to affect them in an early stage of, hopefully, their criminal life. And that's the stage that you get them. That's the stage that you prevent them from re-offending. That's how you reduce recidivism. By the time you get to state prison, more than likely, either the seriousness of your crime or the number of crimes you've committed, you're not an easy candidate to rehabilitate. And the truth is we're housing in there. I always refer to county jail as the junior college, and across the street at CMC as the university. It's one university we don't want to send our kids. We've got to get them at that early stage when they're new, they're young. Hopefully we can make a change, because if we don't, it's kind of like allowing your child to do something their entire life, and at 18 you decide you don't like it anymore, and you're going to tell them, stop doing that. And they've already had the behavior for a number of years. It's very difficult to do. So it does give us some opportunity to try to make change. We have a number of people in custody that are drug and alcohol related offenses. We have a significant problem with drugs and alcohol. We really do in this country. And we pay for that every day in one form or another. Either we're paying for it by housing the inmates that are caught up in it, we're paying for it in medical care, on a variety of fronts. We really need to look at those offenses and do what we can to change some of that dependency, that behavior, because it's costing us a lot of money. And so we have some opportunity now, and I'm really hopeful with this process. The good side of realignment is that we're going to have some more opportunity. And trust me, I spoke in front of the Board of Supervisors a couple weeks ago, and I said my job running the jail I have really two responsibilities: provide a humane and a safe environment. My job is not to provide for a country club. It's not to make them comfortable. That's not the design of jail or prison. It's to provide humane treatment for them while they're in custody and provide for their safety. It's a challenge at times, but the truth is if I mention to them, if you go down to Cal Poly or to San Luis Obispo and you see some of those Poly students in some of those apartments, there's 4 in a room. They're not very comfortable. So my goal is not to make the inmates comfortable either. They're not going to get a better living situation than the other. And truthfully, right now, they are. They are in the sense that they're provided better health care than many of us. They're provided, as they say, 3 hots in a cot. And that's our responsibility we take on. But it's not to provide a 5-star for them. So, no questions? Okay.
I have a question for you. Strikes. Do you think that some of those people have left the state and they knew they're going to be, next time they're going to be in jail forever?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure they have.
Do you have statistics?
I haven't read any statistics, but I'll be happy to take a look and get back to you and see if there's anything out there. The stuff I've read, there's nothing that says that on there, but I've heard that mentioned before, that people do leave, and quite honestly, if they're smart, they do leave. Yeah, leave California.
Sheriff, what kind of a program is your department going to set up to apprehend those sociopathic merchants that might allow a plastic bag to fall into the hands of his customer?
Next question.
Dragnet.
Have you found that in the states where the death penalty is on the books, are they finding it as a deterrent? That's my first part of my question.
I thought that was your private microphone. So the question was, those states that have an effective death penalty sentence, have I seen anything that really says it's a deterrent?
Exactly.
I haven't seen anything. I've read about that because I've heard that mentioned several times, and my take on it is no. And I say that in a very general, broad brush term because I think that the majority of the people that I've run into and I've had contact with that have committed those crimes, they don't really care from the beginning, let alone when they kill somebody. So they don't think before they kill somebody, hey, I might get the death penalty in 30 years after being in custody or next year. I think there are probably cases, but my guess is, based on my observations, I don't see any evidence of that.
With the double standard, we have the death penalty, and we have it for a purpose. If you do the crime, you're going to be put to death. Is there any legislation to fast track and not without them losing their, God forbid, they should lose their rights, even though they've deprived others of that? Is there anything on the books or anything in the works that can clean up the bog? I mean, 20 years on death row, you're still feeding them, and it loses the deterrent factor of the death penalty.
Unfortunately, I have seen nothing, and I've asked that very question. I asked, when we discussed this at state sheriffs, I asked, has anybody seen anything on the horizon proposed to fast track or speed up this process? Mm-hmm. Because that's what I'm most interested in.
Exactly.
If we can do something differently, there are other models out there. There are other states that do it much better than us. Unfortunately, we live in the state that likes to sue a lot. And, we get sued, in the prison system for not providing enough medical care. I have a claim now against us for not providing as great a care as Tascadero State Hospital. What we're required to provide, the trouble we've gotten into because of that has been a real issue.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dan O'Kimball, KBRL. I had Jeannie Woodford on last week, who was former warden of San Quentin Prison. There's two things that she alluded to, because she's a proponent for Prop 34. One is that with 730-some people on death row, that would free it up for double occupancy, as if they need to go on vacation with somebody else, so that there would be more room for other prisoners. And the other is, how can we be assured that if Prop 34 did pass, that some future legislature or court is not going to overrule life without the possibility of parole and make it available to them in the future?
Yeah, I think the second part, we don't know. Unfortunately, every year I'll pull out my bunch again. There's always something out there trying to change it. We can't leave it alone. But going back to the first part of that question regarding double housing. You know, that would be great if it worked.
Yeah.
The problem I have with that is if you go down to county jail, and I've taken people for a tour there, we have over 600 people in custody. We're kind of full. We don't leave the light on. And if you look at our facility and you walk around, I had a supervisor in there the other day on a tour, and the question was how come you have people sleeping on floors? And what sleeping on floors means, they're on a what looks like a plastic canoe and a mattress, so it's not as if they're sleeping on the floor. But that's what we consider sleeping on the floor. You have a number of people sleeping on the floor, yet you have empty bunks. And the problem I have with that is that you can't double bunk them in many, many cases. When somebody comes into custody, whether it be prison or county jail, they have to go through a classification process. And what they do in this process is they determine whether or not they can get along with others. I don't think a lot of those people in there can get along well with others. That's probably why they're there. So in concept, it's great. And in reality, okay, so they don't get along and they have a real big problem together. Do we really care? Just kidding. The truth is that it's good in concept. It's not reality. It doesn't work that way. You've got to still make sure that those two will get along. Otherwise, it poses tremendous risk for the employees of the facility. So I think it's a great idea. I just don't think I think she's missing something.
I'd like to speak a little bit, just a second here. I worked for Department of Corrections 33 years, and I worked in the classification process, very knowledgeable in that process. I know Jeannie Woodford. I know many of the folks at San Quentin that have serious questions about why, after working death row for all those years, she's, essentially recommending that they do away with the death penalty. In terms of the death penalty, I would say first, it is a deterrent. I would disagree. I'd say it is a deterrent in this, when it's carried out.
When it's carried
He doesn't. When it's carried out, and that's the question, is the death penalty a deterrent? When it's carried out, it is a deterrent. They do not reoffend. Hey, 33 years, they don't reoffend. And the gentleman's right, they really don't care when they start, before or after, So it is a deterrent, And it's one of those things that that you can rest assured, we've had the death penalty, they've watered it down now. The problem, the lady asked about, the time factor, it takes 25 years for an inmate to exhaust his appeal on death row. When he goes on death row, it's the legal system, it's the attorneys that are the problem. It's not, and the sheriff can only maintain custody, the Department of Correction, the job is to maintain custody. But it's the legal system that's the problem. So,
We have Josh back there.
Yes, I just put an article
Thank you.
about TSA agents in Puerto Rico, and they were in Puerto Rico, the TSA agents were accused of stealing and sexual harassment of passengers in the TSA line. And I've been through there, and I feel like I was sexually harassed and stuff stolen from me here at the San Luis Obispo Airport. And I was wondering if the Sheriff's Department is responsible, as the highest law enforcement officer in the county, for making sure the TSA agents obey the law. That's my question.
Well, as simple as answer is it's regulated by the federal government, the transportation. TSA is not run controlled locally. If you notice that there's a sheriff's deputy at the airport, and in most airports now there's law enforcement 24/7, or at least as long as the airport is open, depending on its operation hours. We are responsible for the safety of the passengers when something happens. So the direct answer is no, we don't have control over TSA. But if there is an issue, I would certainly be willing to get involved. So if you have a concern or an issue, I certainly have the ability to reach out to the government and help address your issue for you.
2 more questions.
Get Josh back there, would you, Don, would you get Josh?
Okay, now you got to do both, mic and camera.
Sheriff, Today does mark the beginning of criminalized bag distribution, so I'm curious how you plan to enforce the new plastic bag ordinance in the county.
It's not,
And we have no responsibility for enforcement of the bags.
And we're gonna stay on focus, guys. We're gonna stay on focus with 34, 35, and 36.
Sheriff, anybody that want to believe Jenny got to find someone else to read, because I work with her and she's not very good as far as I'm concerned. My other question I have is on Proposition 36. My sense in reading the proposition is that if they're blaming the cause of all these changes, that they're getting less serious offenses after they've committed the 2 strikes. Then they go back and they pick them up for stealing a candy bar out of the. And my question is have you found that to be true in this county or in any county in California, to where district attorneys are just purposely going out and not following what the original intent of 3 strikes you're out was in the first place?
No, my personal feeling is that's an exaggeration. Most of the time I hear that example, it is the 3rd strike is a shoplifting, which is considered 666 of the penal code, a petty theft with prior. And basically what it's saying is because you've had prior theft offenses or related offenses, the 3rd becomes a felony. I haven't seen that. It's kind of like the death penalty. It's you have to gear up, and they have to spend a lot more resources in order to prosecute a case like that. You see a lot of district attorney discretion. You see judges' discretion on that. And as a matter of fact, I think that issue came up back in '94 when 3 strikes was first introduced. What are we going to do about? We're going to put these people in the rest of their life for stealing a candy bar. I haven't seen anything that supports that. Is there a possibility of something being out there? Yeah, maybe there is a case. I'd like to see what the first 2 strikes were, to be honest. I mean, I don't know how many strikes we need to give them, but when you're talking about 2 extremely serious offenses, violent offenses, and followed up by another offense, I mean, at what point, do we say, okay, but 3 strikes, but, if it's not that bad? And I think that's one of the problems. I think that's said a lot, but I haven't seen it here ever.
Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Thank you.